Hi everyone, I'm Scott Olsen. I am standing in the light. I'm an English professor at Concordia College, the author of 12 books of narrative nonfiction, mostly road trip and adventure stuff. And in the last several years, I've become more intentional about my photography. I want to begin by thanking the Kaddatz. This is such a beautiful, important space. And to the Lake Region Arts Council. There are several members here from the Lake Region Arts Council. Their support is behind a lot of this work. And I'm asked to tell you that those of you that are artists, those of you that are looking for funding, the woman sitting right there, Miranda, is the one you need to see her before you leave. She even told me she has her business cards. So you can grab those on the way out. What I want to do tonight is a little bit different than what you might be expecting. I want to have sort of an interactive deal about street photography, because street photography is available to every single one of us. If you've got a phone in your pocket, you can be a street photographer. And what I want to do is lay out some of the definitions, some of the ideas, some of the issues with street photography. And this whole event is actually an invitation, because there is going to be a photo walk. We're going to gather and we're going to walk not very far, basically just from Scooters, is that right, Scooters Coffee? Down there up to the dam. But it's rich. I've been here several times in the last several months, sort of scoping it out. And what we're going to do as a community of people who love photography is walk around and say, what do you see? What do you see? What do you see? Because so we can all stand in the same place, but see very, very different things. So what I'm going to do tonight is begin with the work of some other people, just to sort of lay out some of the foundations, some of the aesthetics of street photography, move into my work a little bit, and then conclude with the stuff that's hanging around the walls here and what that project actually was. So, what is street photography? It's very close to photojournalism. It's very close to the snapshots you took of your, vacation, that kind of stuff. The old, some of you may not be old enough for this, but the old, let's go down to the basement and put the carousel of slides on the projector kind of torture. That is street photography as well. But what differentiates photojournalism, for example, from street photography is two things. Photojournalism is generally documenting an event. Here is a protest, here's a concert, here's a city council meeting, whatever. Your family vacation photos, they're documenting an event. Okay? The street photographer takes one step towards fine art, to say, I'm really doing something more than just documenting what's there. These are not hard divisions. A lot of photojournalism really is artful. A lot of art is photorealism, documenting important events. But if you think of yourself as a photojournalist, you go out with a certain set of expectations. If you think of yourself as, I'm just taking snapshots of the kids, you're going out with a certain number of expectations. If you say, I'm a street photographer, okay, you're going more for a mood piece, you're going for more metaphor, you're going for more cultural critique than simple reporting. One of those famous street photographers, he's still alive, he's 600 years old now, but is Joel Meyerowitz. And this is one of his most famous images from New York City. And if you look at it, you'd say, well, there's two people walking down the street. But you start looking at it and say, well, look at those brown coats, look at these brown coats over here. And look at how nice these shadows line up with the lines and echo that. And you start looking at the steam, you've got this motion going from right to left there. And this couple is entering. So suddenly this whole imaginative narrative world opens up, which has very little to do with what may actually have been happening. Just like a lot of really wonderful art, you project yourself into it. You begin to say, I have an emotional response, I have an aesthetic response to this. This moment did not exist half a second before this moment. That's one of the cool things about street photography. It is immediate, it is serendipitous, which does not mean it's without planning. Okay, Joel's walking around, he's got a certain lens on, he's got a certain camera. There is a old cliche in photography called the decisive moment, which has nothing to do with making a decision. It's the moment when everything comes together, when light and lines and patterns and content all suddenly coalesce to make something artful, to make something beautiful. You can imagine if Joel wasn't ready, if they'd taken 2 more steps, they'd be in the fog, these shadows would have moved. Okay? And street photographers, by the way, miss shots all the time. Okay? But that, you just keep shooting. Okay? But Joel is very much into layers. He's very much into patterns. He and I had a chance to talk a while back, and I told him that what I saw his work was the equivalent of harmonies in music. You've got this other thing always going on. The melody and the harmony together make, with a lux, something compelling and beautiful. So, okay, next one, please.
Can she do it?
Okay, another one of Joel's. Okay, you're walking along and you see this house with all this laundry, and you have a deep intellectual response like, that's cool. Okay, that's the motivation for a street photographer. What does it mean? I have no idea, but you stare at it, you start looking at all these clothes, and you start thinking, well, okay, look at all this stuff. This is all the same. Is there a laundry there? You begin to invent a narrative. You begin to invent the story behind it. But again, with Joel's works, you've got the vertical lines, you've got the horizontal lines, you've got the arcs from the clothesline, beautiful staircase in the middle. A lot of people would say this is a mistake, whatever car top that is or whatever. No, in street photography, that's the ambiance, that's the other stuff that's going on. Notice the deep shadow of the lamp. I looked at that when I came up, and I don't know what Joel would think of that. I showed him this picture. I said, I like that. Next one, please. Once again, he's just walking along. Okay. Now, Joel is using basically a 35mm lens. I don't know how many of you are photographers or have that kind of background. It's a medium distance lens, pretty much like your eye sees. Okay, and when you know, when you know what lens you're holding, you begin to imagine the world around you with that view. I'm going to talk about that an awful lot when I get to this last project. I couldn't tell you what's in those sacks, but doesn't that picture just make you wonder? You look at it and think, what the hell's going on there? And it is formally, in terms of line, in terms of the way it's squared in the frame there, it's a beautiful image. It's filled with all sorts of texture and variations of tone. It is not intentional the way that a photojournalist would say, this means this, or this represents that. It's very much like a painter or somebody else would approach this, but you're capturing something about the culture of that street on that day. Next one, please. I love it. This is one of Joel's handmark or trademark series, and I love this series because it's all about the Empire State Building. You see it there? Okay. And you'll see another one here. And they're all taken at some room. They're not the cliche. They're not the wonderful Manhattan pictures, but they're in every single one. And this little abandoned luncheonette, in essentially the shadow of the Empire State Building, I begin to wonder all sorts of rich things about economics, about class, about Manhattan, about lunch. It doesn't matter. You get in there, and the images are provocative. Okay, they provoke narrative. Next one, please. You see it? Okay, this image actually isn't, it's a little distorted here, it's not actually that narrow. But, once again, there's the Empire State Building. What's this lunch thing going on here? And I love the color palette. I love the green dress and the orange siding. Okay? The very best street photography you sort of fall into, and you begin to wonder about the culture, about the people who are there. This is not the kind of picture that, a lot of people would look at Joel, he's taking a picture like this, and what are you taking a picture of? There's nothing there. Okay? There's everything there. Next one, please. Is that it for Joel? Oh, no, okay. This is the cover of his last book, or a book called Where I Find Myself. This is in Paris, and that guy had fallen down. Okay, Joel had his camera with him, in his hand. Okay, and a lot of people say, oh, if you're a photographer, get off automatic, learn your camera. Automatic is wonderful for street photographers, because you have no idea what's going to happen. And that's basically swing, click, and you got it. I have no idea what happened there. More importantly, Joel has no idea what happened there. This guy stumbled, was pushed, who knows what. But you start looking at all the reactions. Okay, and this guy is clearly, he's not been down there long. Next, please. Okay, Phil Penman, a street photographer working in New York right now, somebody whose work I really, really admire. Joel has a style. I mean, everybody and their cousin has photographed Manhattan. It's one of those places that you think, what in the world am I going to say that's new? Firmly believing there is something you're going to say that's yours and is new. And Phil has gone, not entirely black and white, but mostly black and white, very moody, very dark, very filled with fog and nighttime and rain. He was telling me that every time bad weather moves into Manhattan, his wife is like, "You're going out again, aren't you?" When that big snowstorm came through last year or the year before, I sent him an email. I said, "Having fun?" And he sent me back enthusiastic profanity. You can swear into happiness. He's probably a master at it. But notice here, though, the person. And I punch it because most street photography is based on approaching people. Okay, documenting culture, documenting psychology, social interactions, whatever. But there is a branch of street photography which is entirely architectural, which has no people in it whatsoever. And that's one of the things I'm going to point out in a little bit. But next one, please. Looks pretty much like that, right? Solitary person standing in the middle of the street, bad weather, sort of a gloomy foreboding. This one's in color. But this is Phil Penman. This is the work that he does. And when he goes out, he's looking for it. He's gonna, if some guy falls down, he's probably gonna take that picture too. But it is serendipitous. This is not planned. If you take a model out with you on the street, you can do wonderful photography, but it's not street photography. Okay, so I'm not raising one above the other. But the minute you pose somebody, the minute you intend to put them in a place, you're doing something else. Just the same way that opera is not bluegrass. Both are wonderful. They're not doing the same thing. Next, please. Phil loves this picture.
That's a neat picture.
The burst mode on your camera. He's taking a picture of down the street, and one of these things where you hit the button and it rattles off 14 images. One, complete accident. Okay, but knowing your camera that it's got that little mode, and he just hoped. Okay, and he was absolutely ecstatic that this happened. And again, we're seeing pretty much the same thing. Here's a street, here's a solitary person, here's the canyon-like walls, here's the black and white. Okay, but you look at this one and you think, the way this guy's framed and the umbrella and stuff is just magical. Next, please. But you notice these are all the same. That's the Oculus in New York. Okay, if you've been there. He goes in there and he sees it in his black and white tones. So when you are a street photographer, you can go out and say, I am looking for X, whatever X may be. Okay? And it doesn't need to be the same thing every time you go out. Okay? Or you can go out and you're going to say, like, Joel Myros, the Empire State Building's got to be in it. Okay? Now, you think, all right, when that happened? The other day I was down by the City Bakery sign, just looking at this sign, I'm thinking, I think this is great. And this woman walks by me, and her jeans are ripped from mid-thigh down to her ankles, and she has the most magnificent leg tattoos I have ever seen. And I wanted to go chase after her, but she was in conversation, I didn't want to interrupt. So I started imagining, you could do a whole series with the City Bakery sign. Just make sure it's in the frame somewhere. Okay, and that would be cool. Or the theater across the street. I love the fact that the person up top there appears to also be taking a picture. I don't know that. Next, please. This is probably his most famous picture, and it's in color, obviously. He stood there, he said, for an hour. Sometimes, a lot of street photographers go for a walk. Okay, you keep walking and keep walking. When he leads photo tours in Manhattan, he tells everybody 10 miles is what we're going to do today. But sometimes you just sit down and wait. And he knew that the lights were in sync. He saw that 35 times. Somebody's going to walk, and finally, of course, here comes this person in the hoodie going across. The lights were all red, presto. Bad weather, snowstorm, that's what sent him out to begin with. I would love to know, for example, what this street up here looks like in the really heavy rain. Okay, I've got a series back home called When It Rains at Night, which is all about Fargo Moorhead at 2 in the morning in heavy rain. Well, every town's different. But you can see the similarities, right? The solitary person, the canyon-like walls, the bad weather. That's the Phil Penman style. Next, please. Okay, Stephen Leslie. And this gets to our first ethical concern. Stephen Leslie is a street photographer in England. Took this picture of these 3 women standing outside what we assume is a health club. They're wearing identical robes and flip-flops. But how many people take a break from their day at the spa to stand outside and smoke cigarettes? You look at this and you think, what's going on here? Who are you? It's really compelling what you don't see. And the next slide is actually a text, so we'll pass by that because it'll be too hard to read here. What you don't see right here is the fire engine. Okay, they've been evacuated. They've been sent outside because the fire alarm has gone off. Okay, now here's the question for you. And it's not a term, I'm curious what your answer is. The fact that he does not include the fire engine, that he does not include the actual reason they're standing outside, does that matter?
No,
Why not?
because it's an image that you just immediately look at it and you can hear their conversation, you can hear the intimacy among them, and if the fire engine were there, you wouldn't see that intimacy. Now, I don't know that, since now you tell me the fire engine is there, they might be irritated, but without the fire engine, I thought it was just intimacy and friendship, and I love it.
But a photojournalist would tell you you lied.
Yeah.
You have distorted the truth so that you as the viewer are looking at something
I do
different.
that every day just to survive.
This is the sort of, now we're getting into the ethics of street photography, right? When I frame a shot in a certain way, if I'm a journalist, I have obligations, I have ethics, I have a way that I'm promising the world, I'm presenting the world. If I'm saying, no, this is not photojournalism, this is its second cousin called street photography,
It's okay.
some photographers would say no. Some photographers would say yes. There is no answer, but we decide that individually for ourselves. Okay. For myself, yes, I would go ahead and put this image out there because the reason for the moment, for me, is less important than the moment. I'm not lying. I haven't added anything to the picture, and yeah, I've taken something away, but I've also taken away the stuff that's farther to the left and right as well. Next, please. And actually, the next one is just a text, so go back to that.
Go past that?
Yeah, go past that, because he's just explaining that. These next couple of pictures I love because people think, oh, street photography, metaphor, cultural critique. Steve spends a lot of time at street corners, waiting to cross the street, and he started one day noticing people's elbows. He's got his camera in his hand, just click, click. I have never been interested in elbows. Until I started looking at Steve's pictures of elbows. Next one. So we have this one, and then we have that one. You start thinking, oh my God, how did that happen? And then the next one. Oh, ow. Okay. Now, again, you can be interested in anything. In Fargo Moorhead, where I live, I was walking down the sidewalk one day, and it was late spring, and the leaves that had overwintered on the sidewalk under the ice had all left little stains. And those stains would only last for a short while. But I became really interested in the shadows of leaves that had been stained onto sidewalks. I have no idea why I was interested in it. I thought they were beautiful. I thought they were sort of nostalgic and sort of sad. And so I took a bunch of pictures. When you go out to do street photography, you can't, I put these up there because Steve's just weird. He's got some of the funniest, quirkiest pictures out there, but you can be interested in anything. I think that's the last one, Steve, right?
Yes.
Okay, now we're into some of the stuff. No, let's go to the W. Scott Olsen folder. This is These are all Fergus Falls pictures you're going to see in a second. Okay. Now we're getting to some of my work up in Fargo. I've been working on it for, intentionally a little more than a year, unintentionally for several years, just taking pictures. And there are things that strike me that I'm not entirely sure why, but this is just a little alley. It's off of Roberts Alley by a restaurant called Beer and Fish. And I love the lines, I love the overhead lights. But the more I stood there, what I really loved is this. You can't really see it on this screen. That's just a lamp in somebody's living room in that apartment there. And yeah, people are just walking around. It is, to me, a really just sort of peaceful, nice, I like my town kind of picture. It's not earth-shaking profound, okay, but it is, this is what, the alleys around restaurants in Fargo look like. And around the corner, there's, a little sketchier area, but next one, please. And we keep going back to the Fergus folder. You guys recognize that place? It's here in town. It's just a few blocks from here. We'll get to that in a second. Yeah, that folder at the bottom left there.
Yeah, I'm in it.
Okay.
It's just.
Okay. Ethics. The law for street photography is really clear. If you, as a photographer, are in a public space, on public property, the picture's legal. Okay? And actually, the reverse is true. If your subject is in a public place, but you're in somebody's living room, look, it's still legal then. One of you has to be on public property. Okay? And that's a little bit different, and that's why you see paparazzi, by the way, these blurry images of somebody half dressed on a beach somewhere. The reason it's blurry is because the photographer is standing on a public spot, but with one of these massive lenses. Okay? Now, the ethics are very different. Marginalized communities, the homeless, children, people with disabilities, that don't have the agency, that don't have the ability to say, I'd really rather you not take this picture. What do you do? And I should point out, by the way, there's a small difference between states in terms of public property. It is actually illegal for you to go into the Mall of America and take pictures as private property. Nobody's going to stop you, but that's the law. In North Dakota, they have a caveat where they say it's a private property where the public is routinely invited. So you can go into West Acres, the mall in Fargo, and take pictures. You can't do it in Minnesota. And I have no idea what Iowa or other states. Okay. But here are these two kids playing in the fountain in downtown Fargo, and beautiful summer day. Notice, by the way, one of the things that street photographers have the most trouble with is bending down. To realize that not every picture should be taken from eye level. But I love the looks on their faces. Should I have taken this picture? Those kids did not give me their approval. And even if they had, the argument would be they don't have the authority to give me that approval. What do you think? Should I have done it?
Not if you don't know.
I have no idea who those kids are. Would you take that picture?
I don't know, I maybe, I don't know.
Would
Sad
you?
to miss it.
Probably not without their parents' permission, no.
Ah, you put in a new word there. What were you going to say? Sorry.
I would do it. But I come from the journalism perspective, and so.
A journalist would have no trouble whatsoever.
Right, it's out there, it's a thing, it's in the public, and it's there to, yeah.
John, would you take it?
I was gonna ask you actually, do you suppose it makes any difference? I probably would take it, but it kind of leads to my question, does it make any difference if you're gonna profit from it? Are you gonna use it?
That's one of the ethical issues. Am I profiting off of somebody else's? And that's where the argument's for the photojournalist saying, look, I'm not making any extra money. I'm on, hourly or salary or whatever.
I'd have no problem taking it, but I wouldn't take it to somewhere else.
Okay.
Maybe.
What you don't see in this picture are their parents, about 5 steps to the left.